I thought I knew her, but one anonymous letter changed everything. I was working endless night shifts at the airport, barely seeing my family. Then I discovered the truth. My wife was having an affair. I found them in the park, hidden messages revealing their betrayal. I confronted her lover, and it turned violent. She tried to fix our marriage, but the damage was done. The pandemic only made things worse. I was arrested, humiliated, and forced to pay fines. I demanded a DNA test for our children. My life shattered. I had to make a choice, fight for my family or let it all go. This is my story. Enjoy watching it. April sat at a table in a restaurant. Her 3 kids were with her parents. She needed time to cool off. She felt really mad and let down. Her husband, Paul, had to work during the holidays. He had already worked a lot for Thanksgiving due to this COVID thing. Now 3 of his co-workers were sick and their family holidays were ruined too. Damn fool, she thought. Idiot. Never home when I need him. Always working day and night, and even then complains since I took the kids to my parents. A voice cut her thoughts. Is this seat free? April looked up and saw a good-looking man with dark hair. He smiled. Looks like you need cheering up. Am I right? April nodded. She felt uneasy that a stranger noticed. The man sat down and said, My name is Charles Marsh. Nice to meet you. Without thinking, April said, April Fowler. Charles said, Now that the show is over, why so gloomy? A few days later, April waited in the park. Charles had asked her out after hearing her story of heartbreak. She complained about Paul always working and never being there. He felt sorry for her, looked at his watch and said, I have to get back to work. Can we meet again? Take a walk in the park? Maybe. At first, April was unsure about meeting a stranger, but Charles made her agree. She anxiously scanned the park and finally saw him. Charles smiled, noting her nervousness. He had been late on purpose to see her reaction. Walking over, he took her hand and kissed it a bit too long. Let's go for a walk, he asked. She didn't object. He took her arm. 2 weeks and several meets later, Charles got what he wanted. They said goodbye after their last meeting. By then, he had April's phone number and address. He lingered in her thoughts. He waited a while for her to think of him, maybe even miss him. Then they started swapping messages. First, simple greetings, then over days, more pleasantries and compliments. The bond grew stronger. Saturday night, weeks later, ping, ping. April saw her phone and smiled. Equals, equals. Hi, beauty. What are you doing? Equals, equals. Watching Netflix. Equals, equals. Is it working again? Equals, equals. Yes, thanks to COVID. Equals, equals. You do so much. He doesn't deserve you. Equals, equals. Did you call work? Equals, equals. No, why should I? Equals, equals. Maybe he's busy with other things. I would call if I were you. Equals, equals. Maybe I will. I'll write back later. An hour and a half passed, and the phone rang with Paul's tune. She answered. Hi, love. Did you call? Is everything okay? Are the kids all right? April heard the worry in Paul's voice and felt a bit guilty. He wasn't in the office when she called. She asked. It's okay. I just wanted to hear your voice, but you weren't there. Relief filled Paul's voice. You scared me. I was on the platform fixing a flight issue. I was told through the messaging system that you called, but I didn't have my phone with me. They talked for a minute and hung up. Equals, equals. Hi. It took a while to reach him. Equals, equals. And he asked why. By the end of this chat, doubt had taken root and grew alongside her dissatisfaction. In 3 months, Paul, in his RAV4, carefully moved through busy airport traffic. In 5 minutes, he could take the airport service road, get on the freeway, and head home. Paul had been working night shifts for 10 long nights, each 10 hours. Bad weather and Murphy's Law made airline operations a mess. It was his job to fix these problems, and 7 out of the 10 shifts were a close call. Now, he was finally relieved by a colleague who had just recovered from COVID. Paul could go home early and enjoy a few days off. After another fight, his wife April had gone to stay with her parents in St. Christopher's Crossing. She was upset because he was hardly home, especially with night shifts, and wanted to spend time with her parents. Her dad was a retired teacher, so homeschooling the kids wasn't a problem. Paul opened the front door, almost dead on his feet. He hadn't been sleeping well for weeks because of stress. April was always grumbling about something. His job, his income, their car. Nothing seemed good enough for her anymore. Yet he earned a good salary with extra pay for late-night shifts. This extra pay was called compensation for inconvenience, and he had a promotion on the horizon, though he kept it to himself since it wasn't finalized. They had paid off the house and both cars. When April got pregnant with their oldest daughter, he started an education fund which was now big enough for all 3 kids. Paul had to drive about 45 minutes to his office at the airport, but they lived in the suburbs next to a nature reserve. The location wasn't bad. The city center was easy to reach by public transport, and the house was nice too. Paul had bought it at auction 2 years before meeting April. It was big enough for all 5 of them. There was even a spare room because he had converted the attic into a spacious room by adding a dormer window. Next to this room, there was a utility room with a washer and dryer. The house had seen many changes over the years, with solar panels being the latest. Paul tossed his bag on the table, went into the kitchen, made a sandwich, and poured a drink. An hour later, he sank into bed and fell asleep at once. His alarm pulled him out of fitful sleep 3 hours later at 11 a.m. Paul dragged himself up, feeling empty inside. His eyes hurt from lack of sleep, and he felt hot. He knew these signs well. It was like jet lag, but worse. Every time he worked night shifts, this happened. Doing 10 shifts in a row instead of the usual 4 or 5 made it hit harder. The only cure was time. Today looked like a lovely spring day. Paul chose to start with a slow jog on the trail. He made a cup of coffee and a light brunch. After eating, he splashed cold water on his face and put on his running gear. Then he headed into the woods. 2 hours later, he got back. Glancing at his watch, he thought, 11 miles in 2 hours. Not bad at all. He felt proud, knowing he usually lost a mile or 2 an hour after night shifts. But his stamina and overall shape were getting better. He went inside, grabbed the mail, and took a shower. After the shower, he started dinner. He wasn't very hungry, but the empty feeling inside hadn't gone. He knew he needed to eat. With his plate in hand, he checked his mail. Bills, ads, junk. What's this? Paul paused when he saw a thick, cream-colored envelope with gray edges. Did someone die? He opened it. The world went silent and seemed to slip away as he read, "In memory of our ex-husband and dear father, Cornelius S. Fowler, April 21st, 1926. March 25th, 2020. With love, April Nelson and Charles Marsh, May Thomas Lindsay." A short memorial service will be held on April 1st, 2022 at St. Christopher's Court, Pilgrims, Way 7 Hall, Hampshire. On the front of the card was a picture of a happy family in better times. Paul sat on the sofa, staring blankly at the funeral card. After a while, he pulled himself together and began to think again. That explains the cold shoulder, the nagging, and the hurtful comments, he thought. Now what? Paul felt unsure and lost. He could only think to wait for events to unfold, and then decide how to react. Over the next 2 days, his numbness slowly turned to anger. Paul knew that if his anger took over, he would not think clearly. He made his first decision since opening the envelope. He would return to Tai Chi, the sport he practiced before he married April. April saw Paul compete once and was horrified by the bruises and marks he got from the matches. She begged him to stop, so with a heavy heart, he agreed. Just like so many other things she demanded. Now he had to learn to focus again and find a way to let out his anger before he lost control. Paul returned home, tired from intense training at the dojo. Seeing the card again, he looked at it and felt jolted out of his gloom. He decided to check on Charles Marsh, so he turned on the computer late that evening and spent hours online. April kissed the same man goodbye, not knowing her mother watched them from the bedroom. June Nelson had already feared her daughter was on the path to ruining her marriage. And now, to her horror, her fears were coming true. With a deep sigh, she turned to the bed where her husband Jack lay looking at her. "I know that sigh. What has our daughter done this time?" he asked. "If things go as they seem, we may soon face a divorce and 3 kids without their father. I'm afraid she's seeing another man and things are moving fast," she said. "So bad. Do you want me to talk to her?" June said in a sad voice. "I'll do it with your skills. This is mission impossible. We just need to decide how hard we want to press. If you find out his name, I can check his past. She's cheating, so I won't help her in a divorce. I won't pay for her lawyer, she's on her own. I'm not going to make his son-in-law go through a long ordeal. He will suffer enough without a chance for patching things up. June looked worried. Jack quickly added, "No, I won't leave her on the streets. We have grandkids to think about, but she'll pay rent if she lives here, and she'll need a job. The house, too, was bought by Paul before they met." He paused to think. One more thing. Paul and April signed a prenup. In a divorce, all they got during marriage splits equal. April's money from your mom stays hers, just like Paul's house. But here's the big one. If someone cheats, the cheater only keeps what they brought into the marriage and the clothes on their back. No more help. The cheater likely won't get the kids, so no child support for them, no split of the stuff they got while married, he said, trailing off. Never thought April would be the one. June was wide-eyed and asked, "Why did you do that? It's really harsh. Why and when did you set that up?" To be honest, I didn't trust Paul back then, but he won me over. Now I like him a lot. He's a good man, and I'd miss him. Then Paul typed Charles Marsh into a search engine. Many results came up. He browsed Charles's Facebook page and found a goldmine of info. Has he never heard of privacy settings? Thank you, Lord, Paul thought. There were photos of April and Charles pretending to be a happy family with his kids. One photo showed April and that jerk hugging, and many other pictures of them together. Shaking his head, Paul quickly downloaded them, along with comments showing complete disrespect for April's marriage. Paul believed that this man enjoyed breaking up families. The pictures shook Paul from his indecision. He now knew his wife wanted out of the marriage. It didn't matter if she actually cheated or not. He would grant her wish. The next morning, several things happened at once. Paul got a text from April. "It's spring break and I decided to stay with my parents for now." He replied, "Okay, I will mourn our marriage in silence." April barely glanced at his reply and didn't understand it. She replied mockingly, "Don't be a fool. You will still be absent, maybe even work." And then she realized, grief? What does he know? Besides, it's just flirting. I'm not taking this man to bed. Bye. But if you act the same way, I might think about it, Paul thought. What is she talking about? Work is all I do. Nothing else. Paul called his company's legal team and asked if they knew a good family lawyer. Then, April got Paul's text. June and Jack entered the kitchen. They both looked tired and cross. "What's wrong with you? You look like you haven't slept all night." Jack growled before June could speak. "It's your fault. We were up late because of you. We had to watch your kids so you can run around with that man." April was shocked by her father's tone. "Dad, what are you talking about? I don't mess around." June stepped in before things got worse. "Don't lie to us, dear. I saw you yesterday with that man. By the way, who is he? Your actions with this man are not loyal at all." April blushed and said, "Charles Marsh? It's just some silly flirting. My dumb husband is always at work. He says he's working, but I think he's the one cheating, though I can't prove it." Jack snorted and growled. "Paul works. Believe me, that's all he does. Works and takes care of you and the kids. Nothing else. You call him a fool, but he's working hard for you and the kids. And you think that means you can flirt? Have you forgotten that as well as teaching your kids? I'm also your accountant. I see his pay every month. You should know he can't leave without a pass. His ins and outs are tracked. It's in the payroll. He's been working 60 to 80 hours a week for months. Why? So you can play housewife and cheat. You are out of your mind," he finished. June stepped in. "Jack, please. There are kids here. They don't need to hear this." She turned to her daughter. "When Dad is busy, you and I will have a long, serious talk, and I'll tell you something from our past, if your dad agrees." She looked at her husband. He looked back. April noticed that in that short moment, they had a whole talk and made a choice. She wondered if they could read minds or something. The next morning, Paul sat in the lawyer's office waiting. His boss had a deal with this firm, so he got a meeting fast. A lovely woman came up and said, "I'm Lydia Coleman, Mr. Green's legal aid. Can we go over a few things before Mr. Green sees you?" Green joins us? Paul agreed and followed her into the office. There, he laid out all his proof of his wife's cheating, including the funeral card that started it all. Lydia excused herself after Paul finished and left the room. Paul's story hit too close to home. Years ago, she had done the same thing. She still felt deep guilt for what she had done to her ex-husband. She wiped away her tears, looked in the mirror, and said to herself, "Come on, girl, pull it together and help this man." When she calmed down, she reviewed Paul's data and told him she would call her boss, Ben Green. She worked for Fabian Small, a man who had met Isaac Manor, Lydia's ex, in jail. A few years later, Ben gave her a job, a way to make amends by helping others. It was the best thing since she cheated on her ex-husband. That evening, June told April to sit down. The bond you see now between your father and me took years of hard work. June took a deep breath and went on. What you don't know is we were both cheaters. Not to each other, though. But we both wrecked our first homes. April gasped. This was news to her. She always thought they had no other love before they met. June continued. I cheated out of sheer want. When my first husband found out, I used all the excuses like it was just sex. And it was one time, just one time. But it was no good. I lost the man I loved due to my foolishness. Too much booze and wild urges. She paused a moment, guilt clear on her face. Then I met your father and lured him in. Your father cheated on his wife with me, and I knew it. He had to leave his first love because I got pregnant with his child. By then I had wrecked 3 marriages. My own, the marriage of the man I lured in before my ex found out. And what about your father's marriage? June took a sip of water. She went on. Your father's divorce was tough for both him and his ex-wife. It took him many years to get over it. Even now, he checks on her to make sure she's okay. But aside from that, it also took us years, maybe a decade, to regain the trust in each other that you once had with your spouse. Cheating never really goes away. There's always some doubt that eats at you. When you cheat, you don't just cross a line, you tear it down. It took me almost 20 years to get over it the second time around. I stopped worrying when your father went out with friends. I'm sure he felt the same. June looked at April, her gaze steady. Now please tell me it's not too late. Tell me you haven't gone through with it. And don't forget, your father is testing him right now. April felt many things at once. Fear, anger, and shock at her mother's words, but also relief. It was easier for her that her parents caught her, not her husband. If Paul found out, she didn't dare to imagine it. At last, she said, I haven't slept with him. Not yet. We met a few months ago in a store and hit it off right away. I think he slowly broke down my walls and got past my guard. I had already texted Paul to say I'd be staying here for spring break, expecting us to sleep together during that time. But other than hot kisses and Charles touching me through my clothes, nothing happened. She kept quiet about the fact that last time she wore only a blouse and the bra was in her bag. It took all her willpower not to give in. It had been so long since she'd had a man inside her. Now it was April's turn to find her strength and think about what to say next. Finally, she admitted, Charles had been quietly putting Paul down and I fell for it. I've been treating Paul poorly the last few months. I blamed him for working too much and earning too little at the same time. The poor guy stood no chance with me at all, not even in having a fair talk. June felt she got the message, so she pushed her daughter by saying, but what will you do about it? Either you leave Paul or you come clean and try to save your marriage. I'm going to tell him, and we'll do it soon. This man deserves it. And frankly, he'll get our support, not you. I know, Mom. Believe me. You really gave me a reality check. April checked their shared online calendar and said, I have an idea. I promised the kids to go to the zoo tomorrow, so I can't go home tomorrow, but I just checked his online calendar. Saturday, the day after tomorrow, Paul has the morning shift. If you take the kids, I can go and surprise him, confess, and hope to fix it in bed the next day. April got up early, getting ready for her trip to the zoo. May, Thomas, and Lindsay were excited, talking about what they wanted to see first. April listened with half an ear. She thought hard about what to say to Paul. Even May, at 14, still loved zoos. But on the way to the car, she dropped the bomb. Mommy, when are we going home to see Daddy? Your father works, so what's the big deal? Not seeing him at home or not seeing him here? April answered a bit sadly because the question hurt. Now Thomas joined in. Mom, we see Dad all the time. Even when he worked so hard, he was always there for us. Made breakfast or lunch. Dinner is always ready, even when he works a late shift. Always there to help with our homework. He is there at our sports events. No, May and I are too young for that. May took over saying, we can get why Daddy's mad at you. Why are you mad at him? April felt out of place. Why do you think I'm mad at your father? She asked. Come on, Mom, May grinned. We're young, not stupid or blind. We see you being cold to Dad for who knows how long. You refuse to talk to him. It eats him up inside. And for what? Because you think it works too? Or for your friend, that creep Mr. Marsh? You know Dad's got a big promotion coming up, right? April felt confused. She had missed a lot by not talking to her husband. Of course not. How could you know when you don't talk to Dad? You just give orders and ignore him, May said. April got scared and screamed in panic. Can we have a good day at the zoo or should I turn back? May whispered to her brother. See, she does the same thing to Dad every time he wants to talk. In the end, he just gave up. Thomas just nodded to his sister. April, upset, drove with white knuckles on the steering wheel to the zoo. 6-year-old Lindsay, the only one happily oblivious, enjoyed the trip. The day at the zoo was a hit for the kids, but not for April. Charles texted her more and more, demanding she call him. She finally had enough and sent a sharp reply saying she was with her kids. When the time comes, I may or may not respond to your messages. The phone went silent. At home, Jack pulled a sleeping Lindsay from the car. They all went inside. June cooked a light snack for dinner to balance the fast food from the day. April sat down to rest. Thinking of Paul, she realized it was after her sharp message that she last heard from him. Okay, I will mourn our marriage in silence, she thought. Just then, the doorbell rang. I'll get it, April thought, rising from her chair. She opened the door to a young man in a uniform. He held a video camera and a thick envelope. I need to speak with Mrs. April Fowler, he said with a deep voice. That's me, she replied. How can I help? I need to give this to you, but first I need to see some ID. Just a moment, April said. She grabbed her driver's license from her purse. Here you go. The young man checked her ID, pointed the camera at them, handed her the envelope, and said, You have been served, ma'am. Have a good evening. He walked away, muttering, Well done. April was shocked. Served with what? She opened the plain envelope and a letter fell out. April, the way you ended our marriage was beyond cruel. I should have known something was off when you stayed with your parents more, stopped talking to me, and began to belittle me. You chose not to work on our relationship. If you had spoken to me and said you wanted a divorce, we could have handled it amicably. But now it's different. I demand paternity tests for our kids and full enforcement of the prenuptial agreement your father pushed on us. I found proof of your cheating on Facebook, well documented by your lover. Thank him for me. Now, practical matters. You can't come into my house anymore. I changed the locks. You may collect your things after one of your parents sets a time with me. I don't want to see or hear from you for now. Your April Fool's joke about our marriage was beyond cruel. If the kids are mine, I hope we can find a mutual agreement. Paul. April screamed when she finished the letter. Jack walked in deep in thought, muttering, Charles Marsh was easy. He broke up many marriages. Check his Facebook page. He's even proud of it. You're a big deal in his newest posts. It seems he loves to ruin marriages and he's good at it. He tried to make you think Paul doesn't earn much. I found out his job pays only half his salary. Paul brings home more than enough, even without extra work. This man is a fraud. Jack snapped out of his thoughts when he heard April scream. He noticed an envelope, some Facebook photos, and other papers scattered on the floor next to his very, very sad daughter. June ran into the room and saw the papers. No, it's not what it seems. Please, God, don't let this happen. She begged when she saw the divorce and property split lawsuit. Jack took the letter from April's hands and read it with June. June turned to April, angry. What did you do to him? What made Paul refuse to talk and ask for a paternity test? Afraid, April screamed. I didn't do anything. I didn't tell Paul I wanted a divorce. I don't want a divorce. I was dumb. I wanted to go home tomorrow and talk to him. I wanted to say sorry for what I did. April fell into a chair, staring. Then she snapped out of it. No matter what he wrote, I'll talk to him tomorrow. I know I was mean and wrong, but I never joked about a divorce. Jack, June, and April talked about the best way to talk to Paul. They agreed April shouldn't go alone. Next day. Why are Saturday morning shifts always so hard? Paul thought. Of course, he knew the answer, but it surprised him every time. On Saturday, he put on his raincoat. A while back, he talked to a colleague. The woman said she needed 40 minutes by bike instead of 50 or 60 by car. Paul liked the idea of leaving the car behind and getting more exercise. He decided to see if there was a good route for biking to work. Driving home after night shifts was dangerous. He nearly fell asleep on the freeway twice. Online, he found a used bike in great shape. Since he bought it, he rode his bike to work every day and felt better putting on his raincoat. He thought about his almost marriage and how his divorce papers had gone to the Nelson house. He shrugged this off, wiped a tear, and began to pedal through the cold rain, almost home. He took the path up the back of the house, missing the figure on his porch. Inside, he took off his raincoat, put his shoes under the radiator, and got comfy in his tracksuit. Just as he was about to check the mailbox, he saw someone on the doorstep. He opened the door. The man turned to him, teeth chattering from the cold. "June," said Paul, "come in. Use the bathroom. You look so cold." Paul jumped up to help her, guiding her as she leaned on him into the bathroom. He then went upstairs to draw a hot bath. When she finished, he helped her upstairs. "Can you manage, or do you need help getting in?" he asked. "I'll try. I'll call if I need help," June answered. "Do it. I'll find you something warm to wear. Where's your phone? You can't go home tonight. You'll use the guest room. Call Jack and tell him, I'll be downstairs making dinner." June sank into the warm but not too hot water, feeling better. She remembered Paul's worry as he brought her in, wet and shaking. She recalled how he had carried her up the stairs. Her legs were too weak to walk. She dozed a bit until it hit her. She had a task to finish. She needed to dry off with the towel Paul left by the door. Damn, what was April thinking? She wondered, pushing away this kind, caring man. How can I tell him she made a mistake but didn't go all the way? And what was the April Fool's joke about ending their marriage? That's my first question for him. In the bedroom, she found panties, a wool shirt, a sweater, and sweatpants Paul had left out. She was stunned by his thoughtfulness. The panties would fit, but the other clothes must belong to Paula. April always dressed smartly, caring more for looks than comfort. Paul didn't mind his home look as long as he was comfy. June hung up her bra to dry and got dressed. Despite the warm bath, she felt uneasy. She pondered how to talk about Paul's divorce suit and the April Fool's joke. Ready, she gathered herself and went to find Paul. He was in the living room. On the table, a laptop, some printed pages with shocking screenshots, and a beige envelope. Paul asked, "Why didn't you wait in the car? Why get wet and cold?" June replied softly, "I was scared you'd shut the door on me before I could say a word, so I thought you'd hear me out inside." "You didn't come to get April's stuff, did you?" he asked. "You want to make peace between us?" June was taken aback by his sharpness, lowered her head, and agreed. She thought, I have a problem here. April was right. I vanished for too long, and she was mad at me for it. If she had talked to me and been a bit more patient, she would still be married now. The thing is, she would be married to the boss at my job. No more nights, no more late shifts. Just one weekend shift a month from 10 to 6. Plus, my new pay is higher than what I make now, even with extra pay. But every time I tried to talk to her, she shut it down before it started. June felt like the ground was slipping from under her feet. She steadied herself after a moment. His words hit hard. She had a job to do. Inside, she admired her son-in-law. He could bulldoze through things, but with her, he tried a softer way. You're not mad, you're boiling. This isn't the Paul I know. Those photos, yes, I saw them with the lawsuit. They made you mad. But what made you leave him without a word? She handed him the envelope she had seen when she walked in. She took it, but a coughing fit stopped her. Paul looked at her with worry and said, "You're not well, are you? How long did you sit outside?" June coughed. "I don't know, but I feel really bad now. I think I have a fever, but first I'll watch this." She read the card and felt Paul's pain as her own. She whispered, "Paul, I'm so sorry. We didn't raise her like that. This is more than rude. When I get back, I'll give her a good talking to." She coughed again, and Paul put his hand on her head like his sister did with her sick child. "You have a fever. I'll help you lie down and call the doctor." Paul lifted June from the chair and took her upstairs. Once in bed, he found a thermometer. Lucky for them, April had insisted on buying an ear thermometer. It made things easier and gave a quick, accurate reading. "Damn it," he exclaimed. 104° F. Paul called the clinic. He had to convince them, but the fast rise in temperature did the trick. A doctor would come soon. The clinic was close by. Dr. Satpathy, as she called herself, arrived in 15 minutes. Paul let her in and took her upstairs. He had already put a wet towel on June's hot forehead. Paul noticed the doctor was quite young, maybe even his age, 39 years old. She turned and said, "Can you leave us alone? I need to check her." June croaked, "No, he will stay. I don't care. He can help lift me up." "Okay, doctor, tell me what to do," Paul said. "First, call me Amber," she replied, "and help me strip her to the waist. I need to listen to her lungs." Paul said, "Wait a minute. I'll find something warm for her shoulders." He left and came back with a down sleeping bag. While they undressed June, Paul felt a pang of sadness. She looked so much like her mother. He had always thought they would grow old together. After the exam, Amber said, "She might have acute pneumonia. She needs to go to the hospital." June firmly refused and asked Amber to take blood tests to be sure and give the right medicine. With the prescriptions in hand, Paul went to find an open pharmacy while Amber stayed with June. He soon returned with antibiotics, cough syrup, and more Tylenol, even though he had enough at home. When Amber left, promising to check on June the next morning, Paul called his father-in-law's house. April answered. Her heart pounded. "Hey, Paul, you're calling late?" "April, I need Jack. Wake him up if you have to," Paul said, slightly dazed and very disappointed. April handed the phone to Jack, who stood behind her. It was quiet for a bit. "Got it. I'll head out right away. See you in 3 hours. I need to pack some things," Jack said. He turned to April and said, "Your mother has caught pneumonia. Paul has got a doctor and bought the medicine. Now he needs me to bring her some clothes. And tomorrow morning, when Paul has his last shift, I have to take care of her," Jack continued. "I'll go with you," April said quickly, not thinking about the kids. But before she could ask more, Jack replied, "You can't." Seeing April's blank look, he added, "First, there are kids here, and second, he doesn't want you in the house, remember?" "I understand the kids, but this is also my home. He can't keep me out," April said. "Maybe it's his because it was his before you got married. It's also in the prenuptial agreement. And you're separated since you got the papers," Jack explained. Realizing how serious this was, tears welled up in April's eyes. "I'll help you pack your things," Jack said. After he left, April sat down to think about her situation. Her husband was so mad at her that he filed for divorce. She knew she had treated him poorly in the last few months and tried to remember how it all began. A bit of thinking led her to when she met Charles. Since that day, April, already unhappy, began to pull away from her husband. Charles, in a sly and careful way, pushed her to widen the gap even more. She looked back at what had happened and her role in it. She realized Paul was right, although she was glad she had not yet crossed the final line with Charles, even though he had pushed her hard to do so. She also knew her actions had already broken her marriage vows. The question lingered. How did Paul learn about her new romance? She didn't know, but she knew what to do. First, she wanted to get rid of Charles Marsh. She wrote him an angry note, saying how she now felt about him. But then she chose to wait. Maybe her folks could find out what finally pushed Paul to call it quits. Jack got to his son-in-law's house and kissed his wife's warm forehead. The meds helped her a bit, and June was happy to see him but soon drifted back to sleep. With June asleep, Jack went down the stairs while Paul tried to nap. He had a flight at 6 p.m. Jack saw the messy table and started to tidy up, putting away prints and papers. Then a card caught his eye and his heart sped up. He grabbed the phone and called April. "Dad, did something happen to Mom? Why are you calling so late?" "April, I'm sending you a photo of what I found here. I demand an answer. By the way, your mom is very sick but stable. The doc will see her in the morning. The meds should start working by then." Without another word, he hung up, trying to keep calm. April heard a message beep and opened it. She felt her world crumble. She sank back into the pillows. Now she knew how Paul found out. That sneak. My actions have ruined our marriage. But this card? It could only be from Charles. He messed everything up. How can I fix this? I told Charles I'd never leave Paul. I just wanted comfort. How could I be so dumb? She panicked. She loved Paul completely. He was a great dad, good provider, and loved her so much. In the past months, she forgot all that and wrecked their marriage. It is not clear if they could have patched things up if Paul had learned about her acts without Charles sending that card. But the card was like a death sentence. Just like the marriage deal was a huge mess. She thought her dad had never pictured his girl ending up here. She's lost all but her kids. What will she tell them? The older two can grasp it, but Lindsay will take it hard. This snake wrecked my marriage and I fell for it. It's awful that it was so easy. He could tempt me. But for what he did to Paul, he'll pay. You bet. She called Jack. "Dad, I swear I had no hand in this card. I'd never do such a thing." She heard her dad's words and was not happy. Her dad was right. She should have seen through Marsh's tricks. After a long talk with her dad, they hung up. Later that week, Charles called April. He spoke with a grin. "Glad you called. How are you?" April didn't mince words. "Not good. My folks found out about us and are very upset. Now my mom is sick. Pneumonia. It's tough to beat. Drugs. She's partway resistant to them." Charles didn't care her folks found out. He had his own plans. He wanted to dig more about April's mom to drive a wedge between April and her folks. He asked smoothly, "Pneumonia. Where did she catch that?" "Cold and wet. Waiting for someone to come home." "But that's not why I called. I need to see you. When can you?" Charles's heart raced. "Sure. Is Wednesday good? Shall I pick you up and clash with my folks again?" "No. Meet me at Maggie's Grill at noon for lunch." Charles was sure all was going as planned. Another week and she'll be on my back with her legs spread, he thought with a grin. The next day, June's fever went away, and she came back full of life. She jumped into action to stop the divorce. She knew how much sway she had over Paul, but was shy to use it. This time, though, she wanted to push Paul as far as he'd let her. Paul laughed at her first try. "June, don't take this the wrong way. I do love you, and I see what you're trying to do. But don't you think this is between April and me? You know she still hasn't tried to reach out, and I haven't seen the kids since June." She felt a bit bad. She did mess up a lot, didn't she? All because she was silly enough to trust those signs from March. Paul sighed. "It's my fault, too. I worked too hard. I pushed too much. Some of it was the situation. Some of it was because I knew I was up for a raise. I would have told April, but when she was home, I couldn't say a word. I couldn't do anything right. I worked so hard, but it wasn't enough." Jack added, "And then you get a card saying your marriage is dead and gives the name of April's lover. I get why you're mad." "When we saw April kiss that guy late at night the next morning, we both let her have it and we weren't gentle," Paul said with thought. "Anyway, she cheated. I can't live with that. She'd never griped about me working too much before until the pandemic hit, and I told her we'd have some hard times. I did my best for our marriage. How can I trust a woman who runs to another man when it gets tough? We both swore to take care of each other through good and bad times." June and Jack winced. Paul nailed it, and they too weren't always loyal. June tried a new way. "It really depends on what you call cheating. I know that what April did would not pass the spouse test. I had a deep talk with her about it. She swore they didn't sleep together. They kissed and he touched her body. Is that all? Maybe I went too far. And then there's the constant fighting in recent months and her nasty comments about my snoring. When I tried to talk to my kids, she said it's all in my head. Is that what you're saying?" Paul asked in a voice that could make mountains move. June yelled, "Please, Paul, no, that's not what I meant at all." "And you're right. She treated you badly. I was just saying they didn't have CC. Jack stepped in, trying to keep things from blowing up with Paul. "Paul, we're not trying to control you with thoughts of the kids or anything. Just give yourself time. Cool down and look in your heart. April and you belong together. I'm sure April thinks different." Paul snapped back. "Well," Jack said quickly, "that's where you're wrong. She knows Marsh sent that card and it scared her. She never wanted to leave you, that's for sure. So I'm good for a nice life, but for fun, she needed someone else?" June burst out. "Now you're just mad." Paul tried to calm down, breathing deeply. Jack and June looked at each other. Both saw his effort, and June grew scared she had gone too far. "I'm not just mad. This is a crazy mess. I can't do anything right these days. Out of nowhere, I find out she's seeing another man and might leave me soon. I could lose my kids too. God knows. April has been telling the kids she's unhappy with me. She's turning them against me. So don't say I'm the one who's in the worst spot. I'm the one who takes the hits. And if I start to doubt the good heart of my soon-to-be ex-wife now that she's been caught, am I being unfair? Let's see." "Okay." Jack spoke up after a long, uneasy silence, trying to find a way out. "Let's see what April told the kids." Paul glanced at his father-in-law with doubt, but June stepped in. Jack put her on speaker. "I can tell when she's hiding the truth. Tell her she's on speaker. Paul can hear. And if she lies, her marriage is done. Only the whole truth will do." April picked up the phone right away. "Hey, Dad, how's Mom?" June replied herself. "I'm better, the fever's down, but I'm still tired. By the way, Paul is here too. We have a few questions." April's hope lit up. She quickly said, "Hey, Paul, love you. I was so wrong. I'm so sorry." Paul stayed quiet, but June saw a tear in his eye. "God bless. He's mad as hell, but he still loves my silly daughter." "There is hope," Jack asked. "What did you tell the kids about the split?" They heard April gasp and speak in a worried voice. "When we were driving to the zoo, May asked when we were going home because they missed Paul. I asked them what was different since he was never home anyway. Thomas tried to talk sense into me. They both took your side, Paul. Do you know how hard it is when two teens gang up on you? I lost it and threatened to go home. Then they ripped my heart out by telling Thomas. See, she did the same thing to Dad when he wanted to talk. He finally gave in. They heard April cry into the phone before she went on. Mom, after our talk, I saw I was wrong. But after I spoke to her brother, I knew how wrong I had been. I did not tell the kids about the divorce yet, but they could sense something was wrong. They thought I was to blame for it all. I'm so sorry I messed up my marriage like an angry child, I said to her, my voice breaking. Paul did not want to be on this call, and the quiet soon felt awkward. Then June spoke up. April, what will you do about the kids' wishes? Paul already said he misses them a lot. Paul shook his head and whispered, What are you doing? June gave him a sweet smile and whispered back, The kids should be here, trust me. Stunned, Paul nodded. June turned to April. Any ideas? April, kids need their school and friends too. Without these, things could get unhealthy for them. April thought fast and said, I can bring them to Paul, but they can't stay long since he is always at work. June smirked and looked at Paul. So Paul needs a nanny or their mom should care for them when he's away. Paul felt trapped. He gave June a wary look and began to get annoyed. Feeling cornered, June held her breath. She saw this did not sit well with Paul. She could read him like a book. She squeezed his hands. This stopped Paul from getting too mad and entirely uncooperative. After a pause, he muttered, I don't like it, but I'll think about it. The rest sighed in relief. June's idea was close to a threat. Now she had a chance, but they had to wait for Paul's choice. In any case, there was still time for June to work on Paul if he agreed. April thought. When the call ended, Paul asked with a smirk, Isn't it time for you to go home? That is, if you feel well enough to travel. June and Jack were stunned, pulled out from their little bubble of joy. Do you want us to leave now? Tomorrow morning? You dodged the welcome. I will not be forced. I will not be blackmailed, even if my children are dangled in front of me like carrots. A deep sense of loss and regret washed over June, and she began to sob. Soon her sobs became full-blown crying. No, Paul, please, I'm sorry. I want you and April to be happy. I never meant to force you to stay with April against your will. It shames us all. I tried to give you time with May, Thomas, and Lindsay while April got better. And I saw the perfect chance for this. Please, Paul, don't shut us out. She said all this in one breath, then sank into her chair, coughing and crying. Jack hugged her and looked at Paul with pleading eyes. Paul was taken aback. I'll think about it, but your being here and June's pushing aren't helping. Tomorrow is my last morning shift. I need to hand over cases before I start a new job. Go home, take the keys, and I'll let you know. After a night of mental pain and worry, Paul got up around 4:30 a.m., made coffee and breakfast. Since he disliked the airport food, he packed lunch. He made his choice and was thinking how to tell his father-in-law in April when he heard a noise behind him. He turned and saw a worn-out June. What are you doing up? You look awful. I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing. I pushed you too hard for what I wanted and... June left the sentence unfinished. You made me think, June. You showed me a mirror, making me see that what goes for April goes for me too, in good times and bad. It's a bad time, a really bad one, I'm sure, but I must try to leave. Not trying would be as dumb as what April did. June started to speak, but Paul raised his hand. Please don't tell her I said that. Divorce papers aren't easy to cancel. When you get home, give April the keys and say she can come back after the holidays, Paul stressed. Another reason is I really want to see my kids. I'll see if we can bond again. I need this time to let go of my anger and tell her she'll use the spare room for now. June got up, hugged him. My girl doesn't know what a good man he is, but I will tell her. I promise. June gently touched his cheek. Now go. You'll be late for the last shift. Charles walked into Maggie's grill with flair. He saw April at a table against the wall. She chose a corner again. Maybe she heard about the card I sent her soon-to-be ex. He walked over, smelled her neck, and whispered, "You are lovely, you know." April didn't react. She just looked at him and said, "We'll eat lunch, then we'll walk in the park. We'll talk there." "I don't like your tone," Charles said, upset. "Too bad. You'll get a taste of what my husband dealt with for months." They ate in silence. Charles thought of different ways to handle this. He wanted April badly. She was a big catch. He spent a lot of time trying to bed her. Anything less wouldn't do. But April had other plans. When June and Jack got home, they had a long, deep talk with April. June was still shaking from the stress of pushing Paul in his first response. They nearly lost him then. April told them she had one last meeting with Charles. She faced his evil plans to wreck her marriage and wanted him to pay. June and Jack were strongly opposed, but April stood firm. In the end, Jack gave her a small tape recorder and told her to put it in her bag. He said, "If Paul finds out you met this man after he took you back, don't even try." When lunch was over, April took her jacket and walked out, leaving Charles to pay the bill. He had no choice. He paid and ran after April. She was already halfway to the park. April had a mission and a plan. Leaving the restaurant without paying usually gave her time to start the recorder, but this also made Charles mad. "Damn it! What's wrong with you? You can't just leave like this." He was out of breath after the short run. April thought, Paul wouldn't be out of breath chasing me. Damn, how did I not see this? They entered the park, and she found a spot at an ice cream stand and sat on a bench. Charles leaned on her at once, but she pushed him away. "Don't touch me." This was not what he expected, thinking he almost had the prize. April dug through her bag and pulled out a printout. She showed it to him. "Explain this," she demanded. Charles looked at it and said, "Your marriage to that fool was doomed, so I made him choose and showed him who the new man in your life is." "Who said you're the new man in my life?" "I didn't," she snapped. He was a skilled liar. Now to the point. April thought, "No, I needed comfort, not a broken marriage. I'm here to tell you this ends now. We can't see each other anymore. I'm going to save my marriage that you nearly destroyed with your lies." Charles's true nature came out all of a sudden. He sneered, "No, you're not getting off that easy. Your marriage is hanging by a thread. Do what I say or I'll cut that thread." Blackmail. "Are you trying to blackmail me? Is that what gets you going?" "And what do you want to keep you from cutting?" April asked, her voice turning cold. "How should I put it? Yeah, you'll meet my needs, my sexual needs. When I think you've done enough and I'm done with you, I might not tell your husband about us in the park. The story of your friendly chat will probably bury it, won't it? How can he be so dumb? Does he really think that after that postcard, Paul won't find out about him, even on Facebook? Why does he think he can force me when I know he just wants to wreck my marriage?" April thought as she looked around. "I'm glad I picked this place, far enough to make him feel safe, but in full view of the ice cream stand's camera." Charles took her silence as giving in. Inside, he thought, victory, eyeing his next prey. April wore a thin dress that clung to her shape. April had had enough. One hand fended off Charles's attack while the other clenched a can of pepper spray. She aimed it, pressed once, and turned away, yelling. Charles let go, and April jumped to her feet. She took a few steps back despite the burning in her nose. Charles got to his feet too, about to chase her. He screamed at her, "You'll pay for this, I'll get you. And I won't be gentle, I'll tear you apart." He stepped towards her, raising his hand to hit her. April sprayed him again, this time hitting his eyes. Her right foot shot up, hitting him between the legs. He doubled over, falling to his knees while he screamed. Now, not in anger, but because of the pain. For good measure, April kneed him in the face. This was too much for Charles. He collapsed to the ground, groaning, eyes watering from the pepper spray. April thought with a smile, self-defense lessons from Paul were useful. What did he always say? When your foe is stronger, fight dirty. She thought, it couldn't get dirtier than that. Snarkily, she said, "Now we're even. Stop bothering me or you won't like what happens." Then she walked to the ice cream stand. The owner said, "Quite a show, ma'am," and handed her a glass of tea to take away. April nodded in thanks. "Can I have a copy of the security camera footage, in case he tries something else?" "The recording is on a flash drive. If you promise to cover the cost, you can have it." "Deal." April handed her a $1.20 bill. "Is this enough?" she asked. The ice cream woman gave back one bill. "Tea is on the house for putting on a show." "Thanks," April smiled and handed the bill back. "No, thank you. You might have saved my marriage." Shaking from the rush and crash of adrenaline, she left the park and walked home with the flash drive in her pocket. On Thursday afternoon, Paul rode his bike home from work. He sang to himself, excited about the great long weekend ahead. His new job had started well. His colleagues were happy to have him as the boss, saying they finally had someone who knew what to do. Paul told them he was loyal to the department, not just the people in it. So sometimes he would have to tell them what they didn't want to hear. He offered some of his old co-workers training to boost their careers. He suggested one of them take a language course. She was from Europe and struggled with English, even though she was skilled at her job. Now Paul was heading into his first free weekend. He was going to see his kids for the first time in a while. April would be back too. He decided to accept it and give her a chance to save their marriage. He had tried hard to make it work while she seemed to tear it apart. When he got home, he changed into workout clothes. He started cooking dinner and cleaning the house. Then the doorbell rang. He opened the door to see 2 police officers. "Good afternoon. My name is Officer Johnston. Are you Paul Fowler?" one of them said. It had been a long time since Paul heard his full name, and it worried him to hear it from a police officer. "Did something happen to my kids or my wife?" Paul asked with concern. "To our knowledge, no. We are here to arrest you on a felony assault charge on Charles Marsh," the officer responded. Paul's only reply to the charge was this: "I need to save dinner. Do you need me to come to the police now?" "Yes, sir. You have 5 minutes before the officer comes to take you." Back in the kitchen, Paul called Jack, frantic. "Jack, they're arresting me for hitting that jerk, Marsh. Help me, please." "What? Where are they taking you?" "I don't know. They said the police station." "Okay, don't worry. I'll sort it out." When Jack turned around, he saw April. "Dad? It was Paul, right? What happened?" Jack answered with care. "They say he hit Marsh. They say he hurt him." April turned white. "No, it was me. Marsh tried to blackmail me. When that didn't work, he tried to force himself on her. I used the tricks Paul taught me. Now Marsh is blaming Paul." Jack was stunned. "Can you prove it?" April frowned and said, "Remember that recorder you gave me? I recorded it. Plus there's CCTV at the ice cream stand. Both sound and video. I'm going to report Marsh for harassment." "What about Paul?" asked her father. "I'll help him first. I'll go and tell the police. I need to pack a few things. I might not be back tonight." Meanwhile, at the station, Paul was processed. They took his prints, photos, and DNA. He sat in front of a rude detective. "What can you tell me?" the man asked. Paul was annoyed. He felt like meat, accused of hitting Marsh. He thought they wanted to make him mad on purpose. So he bit his tongue and asked, "Can I quote the Bible to you? If not, I have no idea what you mean or where my lawyer is." "Do you have an alibi?" the man asked. Paul mocked him with an icy tone. "An alibi for when and what? You are doing an interrogation with no lawyer here. Is this against the rights of your victims? Everything has its time. Now tell me why you hit my friend Charles Marsh." The detective asked without knowing he made a mistake by naming the victim and saying he was a friend. "It's clear to me now. You are in the Marriage Buster Club, and your friend got what he deserved for it. If you find the one who did this, tell them I'd like to shake their hand. Now where's my lawyer? Do I need to file a complaint? Are we going to play tough? Do you know who you're dealing with?" The detective snapped back, trying to scare Paul. "You're right, and I know who I'm dealing with. I just can't say it because it would be rude to a cop, wouldn't it?" Angry, the man stood up and called another officer, telling the woman to lock Paul up. As Paul was let out of the cell, he saw the clock was 4 hours behind. Then he noticed Lydia Coleman and Ben Green arguing with the sheriff, while a very upset April sat on a bench by the wall. The sheriff looked at Paul, annoyed, and said to Ben, "Here he is. Are we done?" "Not even close," Ben replied. "First, his arrest record must be wiped from your system as it will mess with his future security clearance. Second, This woman here has info and will file charges against Charles Marsh, who was falsely accused by my client. I will also advise clients to file complaints against your officer and you as his boss." The sheriff's face turned red. He knew the lawyer's fame. His predecessor was jailed because of this man and his friends. He knew a complaint would be filed, but he could soften the blow by clearing the file. He made them watch the deletion. It was late at night when April drove Paul home. Before he left, she said, "Take care." April said, "I want to say something before I go home. I know you don't like me much right now. I did a lot of dumb things, but I didn't send that card. And I didn't sleep with him. I really don't want a divorce." April stayed quiet while Paul thought about her words. When he didn't reply, she finally said, "I'll go back to my parents for the kids. When do you want to see us?" Paul, looking very tired, said, "I can't let you come back now. You're as tired as I am, so it's not safe. You might want to use the spare room. Kids need both parents in the same home, living in peace. Tomorrow we will pick up the children together. We can talk in the car. We have time to sort this out." April felt both worry and relief. She said, "I'd like that. I'm very tired and hungry." Paul, also hungry because he hadn't eaten, replied, "I can cook something quick, I think." A fast late dinner turned into a simple salad with toasted bread, which made April cry. "How could I let this happen? Why didn't I talk to him? When did I stop doing this? I hurt my husband so much he wanted to divorce me, and now he still takes me into his home." Suddenly, April was hit by a shocking thought. "Oh no, he's divorcing me. How can I change his mind?" Paul broke her thoughts by saying, "Go to bed. I'll clean up. See you tomorrow." April asked with a shaky voice, "I know I have no right to ask, but can I have a goodnight kiss?" Paul looked surprised. "April, why are you doing this? For months you went to bed without a word when I was home. You ignored me or gave me the cold shoulder when I asked what was wrong. I sent you divorce papers. Kissing you isn't on my list right now, you know." April opened her mouth to say she was sorry and still loved him, but Paul raised his hand and she closed it again. "No, April. We'll talk tomorrow in the car. Right now, I'm too excited, too emotional, and too tired to have a decent talk. This will end in shouting tomorrow after a good night's rest, breakfast, and a run. I'll be able to talk to you without yelling. I'll have a drink now. You can join if you want. And we can talk about the kids if you like." At last, she saw how deep Paul's anger went. She looked at her hand with the wedding ring. Her eyes got wet. In a quiet voice, she said, "Are you going to drink Dutch gin? I'll have some too." Over the next hour, April told him about the kids, even how they told her off on the way to the zoo. She didn't hold back and finished, "If young teens notice my behavior toward you, it must be bad. It was bad. I'm exhausted. I'm going to bed." April walked into the empty kitchen and automatically poured herself a cup of coffee. When she realized that the coffee was ready as usual and her breakfast oatmeal with soy milk was in the microwave ready to heat up, it was so normal that she almost choked. Half an hour later, she was reading the newspaper. Paul came back from his morning run without another word. He took off his sweaty running jersey, threw it in the laundry basket, and walked through the kitchen into the hallway. April looked at him closely. The first thing she saw were the bruises on his body. She had an idea why they were there. A second look showed that his muscles had changed since the last time she saw him without clothes. Paul had always been thin, like a runner, but now his muscles stood out like ropes. Not large, but clearly there. As he began to take off his running leggings, she suddenly felt a familiar tingle in her lower belly. Damn, I haven't seen him, just his skin, for months. My God, he's so toned. Out loud, she said, "I see you're practicing Tai Chi again." Paul looked at her, then down at his bruised body as if seeing them for the first time. "Did I make a mistake leaving that?" he asked. "You look good, Paul. You've changed. It shows," she said. Paul looked tired and replied, "You have no idea how much I've changed, April." There was a moment of silence as April thought about his words. Then Paul said, "Speaking of changes, I'm going to take a shower, then we can go." April nodded, still lost in thought about what to say in the car. For practical reasons, they took Paul's car. They hadn't spoken since deciding this morning to take the RAV4. The hybrid was bigger and better for trips to April's parents. Once on the highway, Paul asked, Why were you at the police station yesterday? I asked your dad for a lawyer because I'm the one who hit Charles below the belt. I pepper sprayed him and broke his nose. It wasn't until at the station that your lawyer beat me to it with proof you were at work. He claimed you were his attacker. April smiled, recalling the broken man's groans. Her thoughts were stopped by Paul's next question. Were you going to take full blame for his accusations? This load, as you called it, isn't as bad as you think. He tried to have CC with me. I defended myself. I may have provoked him a little, but it doesn't show in the evidence I have. So what now? What are you going to do about it? April's response was quick. I'll file a criminal case. Your lawyer has agreed. All the stuff my dad has on this guy will make it tough for him. Paul smiled grimly. Nothing better could happen to this guy. April took a deep breath and asked, Paul, what about us? Paul looked puzzled. What do you mean, what about us? He replied. I know I treated you badly, really badly. Then I was dumb and forgot all the hard work you put in for us and our family. Don't tell me, I know, I was there. But if you were so unhappy, why not tell me? Am I a cold monster? I still wonder where I went wrong. April began to cry and said, No, you did nothing wrong. Part of the problem was I worked too much and too long. Sometimes I should have quit my boss. My excuse was that I knew someone would leave and I had a chance to take his spot. So I did all I could to get a lift at work. He stopped and said bitterly, and it cost me my marriage. No, please. Let me say where I truly messed up and broke what we had. Please, Paul, I'm sorry for what I did. I know it's not enough, but let me explain. Paul looked at April and saw she was very upset, close to tears. He said gently, Hey, put your hands behind your head and take some deep breaths. Tell me when you're ready. We still have an hour-and-a-half drive to get to your parents. April did as told and started 5 minutes later. It was slow at first, but then the words came out fast. I was already annoyed that you worked so much, especially at night. I was always left alone with the kids for dinner. That's where the trouble began. You did all the shopping, cooking, and cleaning before work. I said this, quite proud, to one friend, but she told me it was all on me. April the fool, doing all the house chores. It sounded like a radio ad. They didn't see me coming home and taking care of the kids alone. When you worked nights, the bed was empty. Then the disease hit, and it seemed like you had to work all the time, even on Thanksgiving. Paul started to speak, but April stopped him with a hand. She went on, When you said you had to work on holidays too, it was almost too much. I took the kids to my parents' place and went shopping. I had coffee somewhere. Charles saw me and asked why I looked so sad. We talked, and over the next few weeks he broke down my walls and made me doubt you. He said you were cheating on me. Remember when I called you while you were on the platform handling the emergency under a cargo plane? Paul nodded and said, And it took me a long time to call you back. I should have known better. My dad told me you couldn't leave the airport without checking in, and it showed in your pay. Paul was quiet, and after a bit April spoke again. That's when Charles grabbed me. I swear I didn't sleep with him, though it came close. If Mom hadn't seen me kissing him, she left the sentence hanging. Paul's hands turned white on the wheel. April put her hand on his sleeve. Paul, I swear I will do anything to get back the man I lost. I've done things that only pass a Clinton-style fidelity test. I'm sorry, I'm really your spoiled, dumb wife, but I want to stay with you without being spoiled and dumb. I'm looking for help to change. This was new to Paul, and he asked, Who told you to do this? Your parents? No, May and Thomas. They said I was nuts for treating you this way and told me to get help. They were right. Okay, April. Now the big question. What do you want? Do I really need to answer that? Yes, you do. I'm not assuming anything. You treated me badly. You almost cheated on me. If no one had stopped you, you would have ended up in bed with that man. So tell me, April, what do you want? And what do you expect from me? April looked at Paul. She had never seen him so firm before. Paul always tried to be the peacemaker. She took a moment to choose her words. I want to be your wife forever. I want us to be a happy family with you in it. I miss the man I left behind when I lost myself, she finally said as soon as the words slipped out. Paul almost growled. April, that's not going to happen. She felt a chill of fear. I really don't want a divorce. But if you think my behavior is too much and insist on a divorce, I won't fight it. Please, Paul, I swear that card wasn't my idea, and I would never have let Charles send it. Hearing her shaky voice, Paul's tone softened. That's not what I meant. I thought hard about it and realized that besides working too much and ignoring you, I always gave in to your demands. I worked so hard to make you happy that I forgot my own needs. I crossed my own lines and decided it ends now. You might have noticed another change. I got a promotion. Now I work 4 days a week, 9.5 hours a day. Once a month I get a day off. No more night or evening shifts. So I'm not the same person you left months ago when you moved out. And I won't go back to the old me. You got a promotion? I didn't know, April said in surprise. I wanted to tell you, but you weren't here, remember? When I wanted to tell you about applying for the promotion, you didn't want to talk to me. Remember that too? I wanted you to be a bit more patient, but you left and found comfort in another man. Suddenly I didn't matter anymore. Paul shot back, the anger clear in his voice. He was surprised by her harsh words and felt his own frustration grow. April nodded, seeing that she had caused this. She decided to address it before asking about making up. She sighed deeply. You're right. I was a real jerk to you at the start. I was dumb to let that jerk get close to me. I know I can be better. Paul took a deep breath. He looked at his wife, the mother of his kids. They had been married for 15 years on paper, but in truth, less than a year. He looked back at the road. I made a promise, he said. I remember saying, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. I will love and respect you all my life. He glanced at April before speaking again. That's the hard part we're facing. I don't take that vow lightly, unlike the woman I once loved with all my heart. April felt a lump in her throat. She heard the truth in Paul's firm words. An icy void formed in her stomach. She feared he would refuse to stay. Thoughts swirled in her mind. Where will I live? What will I tell the kids? Can I raise them without Paul? Will they stay with me? She snapped back to the present. Wait, what did you say? I was lost in thought, she said. Sorry, I said that's the hard part. If I had walked away and filed for divorce the first time we had trouble, I would have been no better than you when you pulled away from me. I decided we should try to stay together if that's what you want. April had been sure it was the end. She couldn't switch her thoughts as fast. 1 minute she was thinking about a messy divorce because of her mistakes and the prenup. The next thing she heard was that she still had a chance to save her marriage. She felt deep relief. It was like a heavy weight had lifted off her heart. She grabbed his hand but knew her mistake when the car skidded. Lucky for them, the road was empty, even as they veered into the oncoming lane. Steadily, Paul shouted while trying to get the car back on track. April laughed with nerves. Just like in our marriage, I need my husband to help me get back on track. You won't regret this, Paul, I swear. Don't make any false hopes. I won't do this without a plan. You might not like it. Paul said, I think we should talk in front of your folks. My folks? Why? Asked April. Because they're already in this. Your mom pushed me to give us another shot. I kicked them out for messing with my head during that call when I said I'd think about you and the kids. Your mom pushed too hard and it made me mad. April thought about Paul's words. So that's why they came back so fast. I get it now. I'm sorry. The rest of the drive was quiet, though music played on the radio. Paul parked the Ray V4 in front of her parents' house. Before he could step out, the door flew open. May ran out, shouting, Dad! Thomas Lindsay, Dad's here! She jumped into his arms. Thomas followed, hugging tight. Lindsay joined in soon. When the hugs were done, they went inside. Thomas shot out a tough question. Does this mean you will leave Mom? All the grown-ups shot back at once. What? May snorted. Please, we are not dumb. Mom and Dad don't talk for months. Mom ignores or mocks Dad. Then we move here. Mom sees this other man we call Uncle Charles. The room was silent till April said, Yes, I was very dumb. Your dad and I need to talk. I hope to show him that this was the first and last time I learned a big lesson. You helped teach me part of it. She hugged her kids and asked, Please forgive me and help me. Later that day, Lindsay played at the neighbors, and the older two were upstairs. The two couples sat at the table. Paul said, It's time to talk, with a tired tone. Can I start? Asked April. Go ahead, he replied. Dear Paul, I know I could say sorry a lot, but it wouldn't be enough. So I'll say it once. I'm sorry, Paul. I will try my best to earn your trust again. I want to be the person I was before all this." Paul looked at April. "I already said this in the car, and I'll say it again here in front of your parents. It will not happen again." June and Jack were shocked, but Paul kept going. "I won't bend over backwards to meet your every need. I've pushed my limits too far, and it won't happen again. I'm a new person now." "Does that mean you're leaving?" June asked. Paul replied at once, "No, I will try to save our marriage, but April must win my heart again. A lot of love was burned because of her tricks in this affair. There is some love left, but I do this mainly for the kids." April bowed her head. "This is a new Paul, a different person. Can I make him love me again?" Paul continued, "The divorce will be final in about 5 months. At the end, we'll see if we can stand each other if we want to keep trying. If not, I won't stop the process. So you better get a lawyer." April's parents looked amazed. April herself was pale, staring at her husband who kept moving ahead. "Now about the logistics," Paul stated. "I'm still working 4 days a week from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. with an hour-and-a-half break. Once a month, I also have a weekend shift from 6 to 4. I don't work overtime, so I'll be home by 5:30. He sighed and went on. This next part was tough. "You'll sleep in the guest room until we decide if we will be a couple again. Also, I'll keep doing what I started when you left. Things like Tai Chi. I'll teach it to the kids to help them defend themselves." April nodded with some relief, though sleeping apart hurt. "Paul, I promise I'll try hard to make things right, but if I see you drifting away, I'll ask questions and we'll talk. If you turn your back on me again, we're done. I'll send you back to your parents." April thought for a moment. "Dear Paul, yes, you are very dear to me. I know it's hard to believe. After my parents and May and Thomas almost tore into me, I saw how lost I'd been. So from my heart, I promise to work on our marriage as hard as you do, maybe more because I have much to fix. I thank you for this chance. I will be the loving wife I promised to be in our vows." Paul looked in her eyes and saw true regret there. Tears welled up. "Okay," he said, "let's start rebuilding. Call the kids and load the car. We're going home." April went upstairs while Paul turned to June. "June, don't back me into a corner or meddle with me again. Advice, April, but leave me alone. Yesterday I nearly said things I'd regret. Yes, Paul, June. I'll try and Jack will help. He said something in the car after you kicked us out." Later, Paul was busy unloading trucks at the house. The kids ran around, glad to be home as both adults sat, tired on each end of the couch. Paul asked, "Is there anything you'd like to do with the kids?" April's head snapped as if her brain moved a bit. "Don't you work? Was today your day off? You'd better get used to it. I now work 4 days a week, 6 a.m. to 4 p.m., plus 1 weekend a month. I'll be home more often. Think about it. In the meantime, I'm going to bed." He headed upstairs. April called out to him. She stood in front of him and said, "Yes, I like your new schedule. I think I'll really like it. And I'd love a picnic by the lake and to rent a canoe. And also, let's make a deal. What kind? Let's never go to bed without saying goodbye or come home without hello. We lost that along the way, and it's not good." April leaned over and kissed him, whispering, "Thank you for giving me another chance. I love you. Good night. Sleep well." She went upstairs, leaving Paul stunned, watching her walk away. A few months later, April was with her parents, and Paul was away with May, Thomas, and Lindsay for the weekend to practice Tai Chi. He said they should learn to defend themselves, and they liked it, especially Lindsay, who took to it like a duck to water. The past few months had been hard for Paul and April. Therapy showed they both had many hidden issues. Paul was used to working long hours, but this was tough on April. She felt like a sailor, alone with the kids and lonely. Now Paul had a set schedule. It was hard for April to adjust. She sat with her mom outside the ice cream shop talking about recent events. She told June about Charles Marsh's trial. He was found guilty and got 6 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. He also got a restraining order keeping him away from the Fowler family. "That's good, honey," June said. "So how are things with you and Paul?" April paused. "I don't know," she replied. "Most things are calm. Paul acts pretty much like he used to. Almost." "Almost?" June raised her eyebrows. April clenched her fists. "Why is this so hard to talk about, even with my mom?" she thought. June noticed and gently said, "I'm your mother, dear. You need someone to talk to. It may as well be me. Tell me what's missing." April sighed. "Intimacy," she admitted. "That's what's missing. No hugs, no kisses, nothing. Our marriage is platonic. I don't know what to do." June asked, "What do you mean? Does he not take the initiative or let you touch him?" "He doesn't start anything. I can hug him, but it's like hugging a rubber doll. He just doesn't hug back. No real reaction." April recalled, "Last week I hugged him tight because he helped me with my resume and I got a job. I was so happy I jumped into his arms. I felt him react when I pressed my pelvis to him. But then he just patted my shoulder, said congrats, and walked away. With the kids at home, of course. A bit of kissing was okay. Do you have a job?" "Amazing. What kind of job? When do you start?" "Next Monday at school. In the media library as an aide. 25 hours a week. Paid school breaks, Social Security, and my own health plan. It's not close to what Paul makes, but it helps." "Did Paul mind?" "No, he liked it. He said maybe me being at home all day hurt my self-esteem while he worked. It's not that he ignores me all the time. He's caring, funny, and helps out. I fear if we lack touch, he'll go ahead with the split. I won't deny him. I crave his touch. But Paul shows no urge," June thought. "April, I think you see this wrong. You want Paul to want you as his wife? Sexually?" "Right." April looked down. "Yes, that's what I want. What if Paul thinks you pushed him away and now it's on you to make him do his part again? You think? Yeah, if I were you, I'd just take his pants off. How will I do it?" June grinned. "We'll shop first. Then the kids will stay here for the weekend. They haven't stayed overnight for a while. We'll pick them up next Friday after school." April looked unsure, but June wasn't. "When you're alone with him, leap on him. Serve him dinner. Make it sushi. Paul loves good sushi. Feed him with chopsticks. When he takes the third bite, give him the next one from your lips." Now April was thrilled by the idea. "I like it. What should I wear?" June grinned wide. "We'll sort it out. Paul won't stand a chance. With some luck, she'll win him back and keep my dear son-in-law. Do you remember what you wore when I found you near the house? You mean that tight top? I can't wear it near Paul anymore. I feel like I spoiled it. That's why we're shopping this week. You need clothes and underwear for Thursday, Friday, and the weekend. Make sure he sees you before he goes to work. I know it's early, and if you wait till Thursday, he'll get suspicious, so start on Monday. Be ready for breakfast when he gets up. Tell him you want to come early to do some house stuff before work. So you want to get used to Paul getting up so early, like at 4:45 a.m.? "Yes, I can do that," she said, smiling. Thursday morning, 4:45 a.m. Paul was getting used to him and April having breakfast together. He walked into the kitchen and his jaw dropped. April stood there in a very sexy dress. It looked silky and clingy, but then he noticed they were somewhat held in place. The dress fell just above her knees, showing off silky stockings, but she wore comfy slippers on her feet. "You look amazing," he said. "What's the occasion?" April beamed. She smiled and said, "You're the reason. This is just a taste of what's to come. This weekend the kids will be with my parents and I will come for you." Paul was stunned. He blushed and felt excitement fill him. "Is this true?" he asked, confused but thrilled. "Yes," she breathed. "I want to go back to bed with the man I love. The man I loved even more after he let me stay at his house after my foolish acts. I want the man I married back. But more so, I want the man he has become." With these words, April walked up and kissed him. "What's going on here? Am I trapped or what?" Questions and fears spun in Paul's mind. Even with the invite, Paul couldn't get himself to let April back into bed. He felt silly but was as stuck in his head as when he got that postcard. Now he had to act. He had to choose if he would stay married to April or split up. Paul got one more quick, soft kiss before he swung a leg over his bike seat. "Screw you. I need to dress better before the kids wake up," April said with a teasing smile. On his bike, Paul had time to think as he rode the last few miles to work. He knew he needed more time. His job needed one boss there each day. Weekdays had two, one for the daily grind and one for meetings and more tasks. Lucky for Paul, a coworker arrived at 8. This gave him the chance he needed. After some thought, Paul took extra hours and told April he'd be home at 10:30. He needed time to think and to run in the woods to clear his thoughts. April worried after Paul's text. Should she have stayed quiet about her plans? She wasn't sure, but she knew Paul hated being pushed. That's why she told him ahead of time. The secret is out, she thought. Later that day, when Paul was in his room changing into running clothes, April came in. She wanted to wish him well and say she loved him. She also wanted to say sorry for their mess and hope he had a good run. She watched her husband. He looked good for his age, with gray at his temples and broad shoulders. Tai Chi had toned him up, narrow waist. She sighed, forgetting that Paul wore special gear for running. He took off his boxers without much thought, getting ready to dress up bare. He hoped to look sharp like a 20-year-old. She pictured a stone with big holes on the sides, not a bit of fat on him. His muscles moved with each step, more a gymnast than a weightlifter. She fought the urge to grab him and have him right then. I can't risk it. If he takes it wrong, it's all over, but I can tell him. April cleared her throat and said, her voice thick, God, you're so good. You're all beauty, inside and out. Paul turned red, making April giggle like a girl. In seconds, the mood broke and both laughed loudly. Paul had a nice run. He thought April should chase him. She should win him for her own peace of mind. If not, she'd always have some guilt. He pondered something he'd read before. The question, are you better with or without a wife? He thought for an hour, sprinting along a forest path. He recalled the weeks alone, times before April's frown, and the answer came to him like a light bulb. Now he knew what to do. Friday morning was much like Thursday. April was in the kitchen making breakfast as Paul came in. This time she wore a silk robe loose at the waist. The robe fell open as she moved around, and when she poured coffee, Paul's eyes were glued to her. Under the robe, April was bare. She saw Paul's stare and smiled, but her body's strong reaction almost threw her off. She said, her voice thick, I'll go up and take a cold shower. Otherwise, you will be gone today without a note, and the kids will see what they never wanted to see. She kissed him hard, ran her tongue quickly across his lips, and rushed to the bathroom, leaving Paul both puzzled and burning with need. He made himself calm down, ate breakfast, and went to the airport for work that day. He came back home early. When he got off his bike and stepped inside, April met him with tears on her cheeks. She threw herself into his arms and cried, You bought me flowers? You made me so happy. Paul asked calmly, So they've already come? He knew the flowers should be there in 2 hours. He planned to be back by 3. Anyway, I thought you were up to something, so I thought it best to try to get on your side. Mom and Dad were here this morning to get the kids things and do some shopping, and they'll pick the kids up from school. That's good, 'cause now I'm a mess. Paul smiled and said, But you're a lovely mess. April replied, You're such a fool, Paul Fowler. But darling, I got sushi for today. You're not allowed to do anything tonight except maybe at the end. She giggled. I ordered sushi for dinner. You don't have to do anything tonight except maybe by the end. She laughed. They spent a nice evening together except when Charles Marsh's name came up. With a shaky voice, April said, Paul, I can't say how glad I am for this second chance. What I did was wrong. Wrong to you, our marriage, and our family. That sly man took advantage of that and made me doubt. He made a fool of me and pushed me to break our marriage myself. I was dumb, but fate stepped in. And you, being the great person you are, gave me and our marriage another shot. I've left our marriage in shambles, but let's build something new and stronger. When she finished her confession, she pulled his head down and kissed him softly on the lips. Yes, she said, I was a fool, but I won't be again. I'm yours if you still want me. From now on, I will be your angel in public and your slut at home. Because of my naivete and stupidity, I almost lost the most precious thing, she continued. I have a man who cares about everything I am and will be. Paul, from the bottom of my heart and from the depths of my soul, I love you more than anything, except for the children. I am so sorry for putting you through all of this. Now it was Paul's turn. April, you really hurt me badly. But it wasn't all your fault. I worked too hard for too long. I didn't realize you needed another adult in the family and only focused on getting a promotion. You volunteering at the school and my terrible work hours. We missed out on too much time together and couldn't reconnect when we did have time because of the kids. I apologize for this just as much as you asked me to, he continued. April stammered, Does that mean you want me back? Paul smiled and said, You never left. I have seriously reflected on myself and what I just told you. and I am convinced that I am a better person with you than without you. Before ordering the flowers, I called my lawyer to tell him to withdraw the divorce petition. I hope you'll accept me again." April showered Paul with kisses, and as they were both gasping for breath on the couch, she asked, "Does that answer your question?" "I'm not completely convinced yet. Can we repeat it to be sure?" Paul asked. April now had a devilish smile on her face as she whispered, "Not now. I have plans for tonight, but I'd like to have a drink now. I need a drink to get ready. If so, I need more than two." "Stay calm and relaxed," April said, leaving to the kitchen. Soon she called softly from the doorway, "Paul, dinner is ready." Paul looked up from his book, his jaw dropping. April had changed into a simple skirt and blouse, highlighting her curves playfully. The skirt was wide, reaching just below her knees, and the white blouse made it clear she wore no bra. "God, you look amazing, sexy, and gorgeous. May I introduce myself?" April smiled, a bit nervous. "I plan to seduce you and become your wife again, but you caught on. I'm still sticking with the plan to show how grateful I am that you're still my husband." She walked to Paul, gave him a soft kiss, and said, "Here are the rules. You sit in this chair and I'll feed you. Do nothing without my okay." She kissed him again, whispering, "Please agree." Paul sat down and sighed, agreeing. April quickly set the sushi tray behind him and poured 2 warm sake cups. After dinner, they made love. The next morning, April woke up feeling wonderful. She still tingled from Paul's effort just hours ago. She looked at him with love and admiration. With morning light streaming through the curtain gap, April realized she was alone in bed. She felt secretly glad. After last night's passion, she could barely get up. Her muscles ached as she carefully swung her legs to the edge of the bed. Paul's condition seemed better than hers, likely already in the kitchen making breakfast. Feeling a bit refreshed, she staggered to the kitchen and hugged him from behind. She gently stroked his groin, making Paul say, "God, woman, you are insatiable. Do you want to kill me?" April laughed brightly. "No. If you come in now, I'll break in half." Paul sat her down at the table, poured her some coffee, and asked, "Do you still want to move in today?" April smiled, answering, "No, you kept your word. You've worn me out." "Great," Paul said. "We have one day together. Let's make it count. We have much to discuss. Did you wake up after your coffee?" "Who wouldn't wake up?" April grinned. "Do you think we should get help? A counselor could make things easier. Better than yelling at home. Or worse, not speaking at all." April looked at Paul with love. "Yes, 3 times. Yes," she said softly. "Paul, you were called a fool, but I was the real fool. I called you names too, but now I'm glad you're a fool for giving me another chance. That makes you my fool." Fool. A year later, April said, "Mom, what are you doing?" May asked. "You've baked a cake, cooked Dad's favorite food, and dressed up." April smiled at her daughter. "Do you remember the hard times Dad and I had a year ago? Please don't remind me, Mom. Thomas and I were so scared you'd divorce." "Yes, honey, I'm sorry for that pain, but that man, Dad, sent a fake funeral card as an April Fool's joke. Almost ended us. What kept us going was duty to you, your brother and sister, his promises, and the last bit of love he had for me. Now we're strong again and in love. So I decided to celebrate. I get that, but why today?" April paused before saying, "Charles Marsh called your dad a fool. So did I. Others said the same after we made up. He took me back after my dumb acts. But today is not just April Fool's Day. Let's have fun on April Fool's Day. If folks call Paul a fool, fine by me. He's my fool and I love him for it." May nodded. "Mom, let me help you. Sign up and follow our channel so your next partner stays true."